I was playing Call of Duty while I watched the Patriots last Sunday morning. My belly was full with a McDonald's hash brown and sausage egg McMuffin with extra sausage and extra fucking cheese. I DoorDashed it and tipped 25%. During commercial breaks, in between matches, I scrolled X for the day's latest political controversy, fight videos, celebrity gossip, and softcore pornography. I took a fat bong rip and sipped on my quad-shot venti flat white from Starbucks. The sun was rising over Diamond Head out my window. A single tear fell from my eye as I realized I had achieved peak America. I basked in my own ambiance, at the magnificent orchestra of dopamine I had conducted, my every neuron absolutely blasting its full load in every direction of my higher plane of enlightenment fucking brain. Call of Duty has always been America's game. What you have to understand about this country is that it's a high dopamine way of life. It is a deeply ingrained, insatiable hunger for big moments, victory, and the absolute domination of our opponents. Dopamine, as you should all know by now, is the chemical your brain releases to reward you for successfully completing survival tasks. Dopamine is what you feel when you eat food or fuck, when you win, acquire, or achieve something. You know that brief moment of satisfaction when you get a kill in COD? Did you ever notice how it's so much more satisfying when you get like a fat 5-man multi-kill with a nade? That's because your brain is releasing even more dopamine depending on the rarity and significance you assign the achievement. Because your brain still thinks it's 50,000 years ago when you're hunting rabbits in the forest or some shit. Brain hasn't figured out yet that you're just eating Doritos and pony noobs as the good Lord intended. This is why football is like religion here while no other country even plays it. It's the highest dopamine athletic activity in human history. Literally anything can happen on any play. There is always some kind of forward progress or big moment. First downs, touchdowns, huge hits and sacks, incredible passes, fumbles, and interceptions returned for a touchdown. Meanwhile, everybody else plays soccer, which is like if blue balls was a sport. 90-minute games and a high-scoring match is like 2-1. You get to the end, it's like there was maybe 60 seconds of view time that actually meant anything. Rest of the time, they were just running back and forth, faking injuries. Oh, and the fucking fake injuries. Our national sports are a reflection of our national character and ambition. The football player will be out there in the snow with a broken wrist, bloody nose, and COVID. Meanwhile, the soccer player will trip in the grass and deliberately act like a little girl who has just been bayoneted in the trenches of World War I, just so the ref might feel sorry for them and give them a corner kick. So long as the Europeans continue to tolerate this kind of behavior from their top athletes, Putin will always feel emboldened to play games on NATO's eastern flank. Now let us assume that Call of Duty is also a fundamental reflection of our national character. What can it tell us about how to improve and better ourselves so that we may continue to dominate in the name of justice and liberty? The Call of Duty community has wisely rejected skill-based matchmaking for the same reason Americans rejected communism. They are both godless philosophies that rob the American soul of individuality and dopamine in the heavy-handed pursuit of a childlike perception of universal fairness. Call of Duty revolves around the KD economy. As I mentioned, every kill is a little bit of dopamine, so it's a question of how do we distribute the dopamine most appropriately? It's a tricky question because for every kill there must be a death. SBMM, like communism, is about ensuring that nobody gets too many kills so that everyone gets about the same amount. But just like communism, this inevitably makes everyone depressed because soon enough people figure out that no matter how much extra effort they put in, no matter how much their skills develop, they will never actually be rewarded with any additional success because the matchmaking algorithm will immediately adjust to ensure you are getting the same amount of success and dopamine as every other player. In fact, the player is punished if they do better because the primary incentives in Call of Duty are experience points and better stats, which become harder to acquire as the algorithm continues to stack the deck against you anytime you start doing well. We all know the feeling. You play your first COD match, you go off and get a high KD in the very next match, and every match after you are suddenly playing against the most aggressive sweats there are, and you're having to work even harder just to maintain a positive KD. But of course, the rise of skill-based matchmaking was itself an emergency response to the brutal laissez-faire economics we practiced when I was a young man first trying to make my mark on the KD economy in MW2 and Black Ops 1. Back then, when there were truly no restrictions on matchmaking, things could get pretty fucked up. The best players would all party up with one another and absolutely skullfuck every poor sucker dumb enough to solo queue. Your team would establish an impenetrable spawn trap within the first minute of any match, and then you'd just farm. Your team was so good you could do it on autopilot, deleting the casual masses for hours-long sessions, infinite Harrier strikes and chopper gunners in every match ending with a nuke. It became a form of gooning, in which the top 10% of players ritually humiliated everyone else 24/7. Whenever the poor sods wisened up and left the match, they'd be instantly replaced by some other poor sod. In the course of a single match, the enemy team could cycle through like 100 different players, each joining just long enough to get slapped around and realize the futility of the situation. Sometimes they'd quit and rejoin the same match over and over again. They'd take like 3 losses from that one fucked up demolition lobby they wish they'd never joined. In past videos, I've compared that era of nasty Call of Duty spawn traps to our current economic situation. Instead of farming players for kills and killstreak rewards, in the real world, the working class is farmed by billionaires for the extraction of wealth. The idea is to keep you locked in place, your hours of labor constantly making others wealthy while your own economic circumstances never really change much. You can see this dynamic measured in statistics that show declines in social mobility or that show how wage growth has stagnated despite worker productivity skyrocketing over the last few decades. Meanwhile, the top 10% of incomes have seen their overall wealth explode relative to the working class, even during COVID. It's why they call it the K-shaped recovery. One group goes up while the other goes down. Just like a Call of Duty spawn trap, the resources they farm out of you, they can use to further solidify their control over you. Real-life killstreak rewards come in the form of media consolidation and political donation. Musk owns X, Zuckerberg owns Facebook, Murdoch owns Fox and the Wall Street Journal. The Ellison family owns TikTok and CBS. It looks like they're going to own HBO and CNN soon. Bezos bought the Washington Post. The end result is that like a dozen billionaires have complete control over the information environment. They decide what gets talked about. They have veto power over what you get to hear about. They can use the algorithms to boost or suppress political candidates or policy positions they like or don't like, respectively. They are allowed to spend unlimited amounts of money on political donations, also to boost or suppress political candidates based on whether they like the candidate's views. They control what you know. They control what people are allowed to talk about. They control your bedtime and when you're allowed to go to the bathroom. They control the government and the laws that govern you. The result is a spawn trap. They farm your labor, keep the wealth, and they have tools at their disposal to ensure that you can never break the cycle. Because just like you can't break out of your spawn when the enemy has a permanent UAV, Harrier strike, and chopper gunner, you aren't going to break the cycle of inequality when they have complete control of the means of communication in a political machine that former President Carter called outright legal bribery. This is what Karl Marx meant when he talked about the working class laboring to produce the very chains that bind us. It's a really fucked up situation. When I first started playing COD, you were either farming in one of those parties or you were getting farmed. This is why back then they had the mercenary playlist. But that's no longer necessary because people don't party up like that anymore. At some point, the devs intervened. They made changes to the black box algo that decides what kind of matches you play, and it became evident that partying up like that was no longer viable. It would get you matched into impossibly competitive matches. Partying up caused more headaches than it solved, and it always felt easier to just play alone. The days of gooning on your spawn-trapped opponents came to an end. With the introduction of skill-based matchmaking, the developers had found a way to protect the masses. But at what cost? Did the solution end up causing more problems than it solved? Had we not careened from one extreme to the other? When we are considering how to make a fair Call of Duty matchmaking system, when we are considering how to run a fair free market economy, I think it's worthwhile to look back at the messy, wacky, and ultimately super creative path we took to establishing our system of democracy itself. For thousands and thousands of years, kings and emperors were all the world knew. To suggest a different kind of political system was absurd. After all, democracy had failed every time it was tried in ancient Rome and Greece. We can so easily imagine what those discussions must have sounded like. You're telling me you want to give every regular person on the street a say in government? Do you realize how dumb those people are and how insanely dangerous that will be? You don't want to have a king? Don't you realize that'll result in pure anarchy? Who cares if the king can arbitrarily execute whoever he wants? It's worth it compared to the alternative. But over the course of centuries, often prompted by specific crises or scandal, societies did the hard work of making incremental changes to how we did governance, starting when the English fought civil wars over the scope of a king's power and established the first constitutional limits on monarchy, the first legislative bodies, and some basic individual rights. But the work was just getting started. What would follow was a long, messy, convoluted process of learning the hard way why kings and popes can't have this or that power, and that process continued right up to the birth of our own nation when we established no taxation without representation, and the separation of church and state, freedom of speech, and all kinds of other cool stuff. But there was never a point where someone sat down and simply said, oh, well, the obvious solution is to have three branches of government where ambition counters ambition, and the congressional branch should be bicameral with a filibuster, and this should all be undergirded by a system of federalism in which 50 smaller state governments have their own powers independent of the main government, and we should have 12 circuits of appeals courts with a special executive court system for military only, and we should also have 24 other agencies like FCC and SEC and the Federal Reserve that are also all completely independent of any of those governments. The system of government we have today is the result of generations upon generations making changes small and large, based on trial and error. Sometimes this meant wacky ideas got tried and pissed everyone off, like when Finland decided your vote share should be based on how much land you own. But with each of these failures, we at least learned how not to do it, and over time we held on to the ideas that worked and left behind those that did not. The result is the system we have today, which, as messy and complex as it is still the greatest political system in human history, measured in liberty, prosperity, and wars won. And what we ultimately ended up with was a mixture of democracy and monarchy. We are not exactly a direct democracy in which everyone has a say. We are a representative democracy in which we vote to establish a selective elite to run things. We found a middle ground, that sweet spot somewhere between elite and populist rule, where we might enjoy the best of both worlds and avoid the pitfalls of each. And I suspect this is ultimately what the perfect economic system will someday look like as well. It will be a combination of market solving some problems, collective action solving others. And really, that's the solution we've already arrived at as a nation through our own trial and error so far. After all, things like Medicare and Social Security, these are like textbook definition socialist programs, right? It's every American doing their patriotic duty of pooling their resources together to collectively solve a problem. Mainly, taking care of grandma. And we all love our fucking grandmas, don't we? So what's wrong with that? We've had those programs for nearly 80 years, and guess what? Stalin never rose from the grave and started rubbing his nutsack on our foreheads. The world just kept carrying on the way it always does. Everyone wants to be like, oh, you're on the socialist team, I'm on the capitalist team. But really, we're all on the same team. Team America. This is why it's frustrating to me that anytime I say something like, tax billionaires, or stop fucking poor people in the ass, everyone immediately starts calling me a socialist. Please, it's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard in my whole entire life. I'm a small business owner. I'm a self-made man. I've got nothing but love for the game. And if it works for government and economics, you bet your ass there's a middle ground on Call of Duty matchmaking too. It's not about saying, should the game have SBMM or not have SBMM? It's about finding that sweet spot, introducing creative mechanisms, incentives, caveats, exceptions, and exceptions to the exceptions that allow the system to run perfectly and achieve peak player prosperity, even if it looks a little bit chaotic on paper. It's about nuance, okay? The truth is, there should be some form of team balancing. Imagine if Call of Duty was a sport like football. Would anyone take the game or any of the game's players seriously if NFL caliber players were getting put up against high school players? Of course not. At the same time, the NFL itself wouldn't be very interesting if after every single game, players were being immediately adjusted onto new algorithmically designed super teams or super bad teams. You'd quickly end up with 2 Pro Bowl teams with the skill pool so saturated nobody could even stand out. Even Tom Brady would just have regular stats, and there would be the one interesting match a week while the rest were kind of eh. You would never be able to get an idea of which players were able to excel and adapt to shifting circumstances and their teammates' skill mismatches at specific positions. There'd be no variety, no surprises, no particular play or player would ever really stand out because every player's skill would be kept in check by another player of the exact same skill. It would just be a monotonous grind of nearly identical plays and games. So is there some way to get the best of both worlds and to avoid the pitfalls of each? What about a system where every time you won a match, you were placed against others who had just won their last match, and every time you lost, you were placed against someone who had just lost? What if we included something akin to the ranking system in Halo 3, where every playlist has a separate skill rating that goes up or down 1 point at a time, depending on whether you won or lost, with the floor at 0 and the ceiling at 10? What if you got an XP multiplier relative to your current skill rating? What if people played COD matches to win instead of just to farm scrubs to feel good? What if they did a combination of all these things, with exceptions and exceptions to the exceptions? What if they got super specific with a detailed plan exclusive to every minor variation in the situations? What if they handled high-skilled solo queues with a completely different set of matchmaking parameters than a triple queued party of average skill? But what if they added or removed rules for each of those groups based on region or ping or hours played that day? What if in the end we got a matchmaking system with as much depth and complexity as our government or economy? Only then will we truly solve the crisis of SBMM. And if we can solve Call of Duty, then maybe, just maybe, we can save America too. The For the Win query of the day is, how would you solve the SBMM crisis? And how would you save America? Don't forget to like and subscribe. Guys, be sure to hit that fucking bell, okay? And follow me on Discord. Listen, I need backup. I'm looking for clips. Any cool gameplay from pretty much any game, you should send me your cool footage you have. You can send it on Discord or my email, dobinator9000@gmail.com. I am always on the lookout for any cool commentary suggestions or news stories as well that you think I should be aware of. Make sure you also subscribe to my homeboy Fizzy. He's been super helpful with carrying me in video games so I can actually play them and talk about them, and also getting epic gameplay clips. A lot of those you see in this video. He's a cool guy. May the force be with us all in these trying times. This is Batman, signing out.